My name is Daniel. I'm 28, and for most of my life I thought I understood what loyalty in a relationship meant. I grew up in a household where my parents rarely agreed on anything, but one thing my dad always told me stuck. Respect is the only thing that keeps love alive. The moment one of you starts treating the other like they don't matter, it's over. I didn't realize how true that was until I met Claire and we started living together. At first, she was everything I thought I wanted: funny, quick-witted, and able to walk into any room and make it feel brighter. But over time, those little flashes of humor turned sharper, more cutting, and most of the time, the jokes were at my expense. We'd been together for 3 years, and I thought moving in together was going to solidify us. I remember carrying boxes into our shared apartment, sweating in the summer heat, and watching her direct where things should go. I laughed it off, thinking she just liked things a certain way, but the truth was, that move-in day was the first glimpse of how she saw the relationship. She wasn't planning on sharing her life with me. She was planning on me fitting into the space she had already carved out for herself. My role, in her mind, was to adjust, to accommodate, and to stay quiet when her decisions overshadowed mine. I told myself I was imagining it, that all couples needed time to adjust to each other. But the little things piled up faster than I expected. It started with subtle dismissals. I'd suggest a place for dinner, and she'd roll her eyes and say, "That's so boring. Let's do something else." I'd try to plan a weekend trip, and she'd casually change it without asking me. At first, I let it slide because I thought, maybe she just has stronger preferences, and I wanted her to be happy. But the problem was that my preferences slowly started disappearing altogether. It got to the point where I'd stop suggesting things, just to avoid the inevitable dismissal. And she noticed, and seemed to enjoy the control. Her friends became part of the audience too. I'd sit with them, trying to be part of the conversation, and suddenly I'd be the punchline. "Daniel, don't you know by now you're not allowed to pick the restaurant?" she'd say, laughing, and her friends would laugh with her. I'd force a smile, but inside I felt smaller every time. The breaking point, the first spark that told me something was very wrong, came one Friday evening. I had asked her earlier in the week if she wanted to do a quiet night together, maybe watch a movie and order takeout. She said sure, so I bought groceries, cleaned the place, and even set up the living room to feel cozy. But when Friday rolled around, she walked in already dressed up. High heels, makeup, that look she only wore when she wanted attention outside. "Oh, I forgot to tell you," she said casually, grabbing her bag. "I'm going out with the girls tonight. Don't wait up." I must have looked disappointed because she smirked and added, "Stop acting like my husband, Daniel. You don't own me." Then, almost as if on cue, she called one of her friends on speaker, repeating the line like a joke. "He's pouting again. Thinks he gets to decide where I go." Can you believe that? The sound of laughter filled the room, and I just stood there, frozen. That sentence hit harder than I expected. It wasn't that I thought I owned her, of course not. But the way she said it, the way she reduced me to some nagging shadow in the background of her life, made me realize she didn't see me as a partner. She saw me as a placeholder, someone convenient to come home to when it suited her. I tried to swallow my pride that night, telling myself not to make a scene, but inside I could feel something shifting. It was like a line had been crossed. Respect, that thing my dad warned me about, was gone. And once it's gone, it doesn't come back. The following week was even worse. She came home late from her so-called girls' nights, brushing off my questions with vague excuses. "Don't worry so much," she'd say. Or, "You're acting paranoid." I wasn't accusing her of anything specific. I just wanted honesty. But every answer I got felt rehearsed, like she was telling me the bare minimum to shut me up. And yet, every time I considered confronting her directly, I thought about the way she'd smirk, the way she'd laugh it off, and I stopped myself. Because deep down, I knew she wasn't going to take me seriously. She never did. That's when the thought first crossed my mind. What would happen if I stopped being so predictable? What if I stopped waiting for her to give me scraps of respect and instead showed her what life looked like without my silence? I didn't know the answer yet, but I felt it bubbling under the surface. And when she announced, almost proudly, that she'd be gone for a girls' weekend in another city, I smiled politely and nodded. But inside, I felt something stir. Because this time, I wasn't going to just sit quietly and let her laugh at me again. That weekend became the moment everything shifted. But I'll stop here for now, because that's where the tension really begins, when silence turns into a plan and when her smirk was about to meet something she didn't expect at all. The weekend she left for her so-called girls' trip was the first quiet stretch of time I'd had in months. No rolling eyes at my every suggestion, no sarcastic digs when I tried to talk about my day, no buzzing phone filling the apartment with laughter that didn't include me. At first, I just sat there in the silence, realizing how much space she had taken up, not in the apartment, but in my head. I cooked myself dinner, something simple, and for the first time in a long time I ate it without feeling like I had to rush before she got home. But while the peace was nice, my thoughts kept circling back to the same thing. Why was I the only one compromising, the only one making room? That question grew louder when I found out more about this girl's weekend. She had left her itinerary on the counter, not realizing I'd see it. I didn't snoop. It was right there next to the coffee maker, written in her messy handwriting. Dinner reservations for two, spa treatments booked for a couple, a note about champagne. My stomach sank when I read it. This wasn't a girl's trip. This was something else entirely. My heart raced. But instead of blowing up her phone, instead of confronting her right away, I just folded the paper neatly and tucked it back where she left it. Because at that moment, I realized she wasn't just being dismissive anymore. She was lying. And lying with confidence, like she expected me to be too blind or too weak to notice. The following week after she returned, she strutted in as if nothing had happened, tossed her bags down, showed me pictures of her and her friends, though I noticed some photos carefully cropped, only showing one or two people in the frame. She laughed loudly, filling the apartment with stories I wasn't invited to be part of. And when I didn't react enthusiastically enough, she tilted her head and said, "You really need to loosen up, Daniel. Not everything is about you." That one sentence stung more than she probably realized, because it confirmed what I'd been feeling. Nothing was ever about me. Not my needs, not my wants, not my feelings. Her behavior grew bolder after that. She started inviting her friends over more often, turning our apartment into her stage. I'd walk into my own living room and find them sprawled across the couch, sipping wine, laughing at stories that almost always had me as the punchline. "Daniel still doesn't get it," she'd say, nudging one of them. "He thinks I need his permission for things. Isn't that hilarious?" They'd laugh, and I'd force myself to smile, retreating into the kitchen. The more I pulled back, the more she seemed to perform, as if humiliating me gave her some kind of thrill. I remember one particular night when I couldn't take it anymore. She had her two closest friends over, and they were going through photos on her phone. One of them snickered and said, "Wow, you really had fun last weekend." Claire just smirked, flicking through the pictures, and then her eyes darted to me. "Oh, Daniel doesn't care. He's basically like my roommate who pays the bills. Right, Daniel?" The room erupted in laughter, and I stood there gripping the counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a lack of respect. It was open contempt. And yet, I stayed quiet. Not because I was weak, but because something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me explode. Instead, I started to watch, to listen, to collect every little detail she let slip. She wasn't careful anymore. She didn't think she had to be. She'd leave her phone face up on the counter, messages lighting up with names I didn't recognize. She'd talk openly on calls, assuming I wasn't paying attention. And while she laughed louder, I grew quieter, more deliberate. It was during this stretch that her manipulation took on a new form. She started painting herself as the victim, to her friends, and even to some of my own. I'd noticed the shift in tone when we hung out with mutual acquaintances. They'd look at me with pity, as if they believed the story she was feeding them, that I was controlling, that I was insecure, that she was just trying to live her life while I held her back. She was rewriting our relationship in real time, turning me into the villain so she could play the misunderstood partner. And the worst part? People believed her. Why wouldn't they? She was charismatic, magnetic even. I was quieter, more reserved, easier to cast as the shadow in her spotlight. One evening, I overheard her talking to her sister on the phone, her voice carrying through the bedroom door. "Daniel's just so predictable. He'll never leave. He needs me too much. I could walk all over him, and he'd still be there." I froze in the hallway, my chest tightening with every word. That was the moment I understood exactly how she saw me. Not as a partner, not even as an equal, but as a safety net she could kick around without fear of it breaking. I went to bed that night with a storm in my chest. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing her soft breathing beside me. And I thought about all the sacrifices I had made to make this relationship work. All the times I swallowed my pride, stayed quiet, chose peace over confrontation. And now, I realized, that wasn't seen as kindness or patience. It was seen as weakness. She thought I'd never walk away, that I'd never have the courage to show her what my silence had been hiding all along. And that's when my decision became clear. Not in a burst of anger, not in a heated argument, but in the cold clarity of the early morning hours, lying next to someone who believed I'd never stand up for myself. That was the night I started planning. Slowly, carefully, quietly. Because if she thought she knew me so well, if she thought I was predictable, then maybe it was time to prove her wrong in a way she would never see coming. That plan, though, needed patience. And while she was busy mocking me in front of her friends, while she was out on her late-night girls' dinners, I was putting the pieces together. She didn't know it yet, but every smirk, every eye roll, every dismissive laugh was leading her straight into the moment she'd never forget. And it all started to come together the next time she announced another weekend away. When she announced another girls' weekend, her tone was almost daring, like she wanted to see if I'd object. She leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone, and said casually, "By the way, I'll be gone again this Friday through Sunday. The girls want another trip. Don't wait up." She didn't even look at me, just tossed the words over her shoulder like I was a roommate she needed to notify about her schedule. I nodded slowly, keeping my expression neutral, but inside, I was boiling. Because by then, I knew too much to pretend. I had pieced it together from her carelessness. The cropped photos, the receipts left in her purse, the voices on speakerphone she thought I wasn't listening to. This wasn't about her needing space or wanting time with friends. She wasn't escaping me. She was replacing me. The confirmation came 2 days before her trip. I was doing laundry, pulling clothes out of the dryer, when I found a hotel receipt in the pocket of one of her jeans. Not from the last trip, but from a different weekend when she had told me she was helping her sister move. The receipt had 2 breakfasts, 2 cocktails, and a signature, her handwriting, plain as day. My chest tightened as I stared at it. It wasn't the money that bothered me. It was the certainty. She hadn't even tried to hide it. It was as if she had stopped seeing me as someone she needed to lie to. That night, I tried one last time to reach her, to salvage something from the wreckage. We were sitting on the couch, and I asked carefully, "Claire, is there something you want to tell me? About these trips?" She looked at me blankly for a moment, then smiled, cold and thin. "Daniel, you're paranoid. Seriously, you need to stop acting like we're married. I don't owe you explanations for every second of my life." She said it with that same smirk, the one that told me she believed she had the upper hand, that I'd never push back. But the true betrayal came the night before she left. She was in the shower, and her phone lit up on the nightstand. I had never touched her phone before, never snooped, but something in me snapped. My hands shook as I picked it up, and the first message I saw was enough to make my stomach drop. "Can't wait to see you again this weekend." The name wasn't one of her girlfriends. It was a man's name, one I didn't recognize. My breath caught in my throat as I scrolled. The messages weren't vague, weren't deniable. They were explicit, affectionate, the kind of words you only say when you've crossed every line there is to cross. I sat there on the edge of the bed, phone in my hand, my chest heavy with a mix of anger, grief, and a strange calm. The calm of realizing everything I had suspected was true, that I hadn't been crazy or insecure, I had been played. Played for months. And worse, she had mocked me for it. She had stood in our living room, in front of her friends, laughing about how predictable I was, how I'd never leave. She had looked me in the eye and told me I was paranoid, while planning entire weekends with someone else. When she came out of the shower, towel wrapped around her, humming like nothing was wrong, I couldn't even look at her. I put the phone back exactly where it had been, and I slipped out of the room. She didn't notice. She never noticed me anymore, not unless she needed an audience. That night, I lay awake beside her, listening to her breathe, and I felt something inside me break. Not in a dramatic way, not in anger or tears, but in quiet, absolute finality. Whatever had been left between us was gone. She wasn't my partner anymore. She was a stranger who had taken over my life, convinced I'd never have the courage to take it back. And in that silence, a plan formed so clearly it was almost frightening. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to confront her with evidence she would only laugh off. No, I was going to do something she could never predict, something that would shatter the smug certainty she had built her entire narrative on. When she left for her weekend trip that Friday morning, tossing a careless "see you Sunday" over her shoulder, she had no idea she was walking out of our apartment for the last time. I'll stop here, because that's the moment everything changed, when betrayal turned into resolve, and when her laughter set the stage for the shock she never saw coming. When the door clicked shut behind her that Friday morning, the silence that followed felt different from the other times she'd left. It wasn't just quiet, it was heavy, final. I stood in the middle of our living room, staring at the space she had just walked through, and I felt like the air had shifted. For 3 years, my life had revolved around her moods, her approval, her dismissals. Now, for the first time, I was seeing the outlines of a world where she wasn't the center. It should have been freeing, but in that moment, it just hurt. I sat down on the couch we'd picked out together, my hands gripping the cushions, and let the weight of it hit me. I had been lied to, manipulated, humiliated. Every time I had swallowed my pride to keep the peace, she had taken it as proof that she could push further. Every night she had spent laughing with her friends about my supposed predictability, she had been feeding herself the story that I wasn't strong enough to walk away. And now I had the proof, undeniable, sitting in her phone. The messages, the receipts, the casual cruelty of her words. I'll admit, the first wave wasn't anger. It was grief. I thought about the nights I had stayed up late finishing work so I could afford this apartment, the small sacrifices I made without fanfare so she could have the things she wanted. I thought about the dinners I planned, the surprises I tried to organize, the way I defended her to my friends when they raised quiet concerns. And for what? For her to look at me and see a placeholder, a fool she could step over on her way to someone else. That grief turned into something heavier as the hours ticked by. I didn't eat much that day. I barely moved. I found myself walking through the apartment, staring at our photos on the wall, remembering the moments I thought were genuine. A trip to the beach where she held my hand and whispered that she couldn't imagine her life without me. A family gathering where she introduced me as the man she wanted to spend forever with. Lies I realize now. Or at least, promises made without weight. I touched the frames, one by one, and felt the sting of betrayal all over again. By Saturday morning, though, the grief started to shift. I woke up in a bed that still smelled like her perfume, the sheets half tangled from where she had tossed and turned the night before, and I knew I couldn't keep drowning in the sadness. She had already taken enough from me. My pride, my peace, my trust. If I let her take my will to stand up for myself, too, then she'd win twice. So I started small. I pulled out a notebook and wrote down everything I knew, the trips, the receipts, the messages, the overheard conversations. I wasn't writing it to confront her, not directly. I was writing it because I needed to remind myself that this wasn't in my head, that I wasn't paranoid or overreacting. Every page I filled was like reclaiming a piece of myself she had chipped away. Then I began looking around the apartment with new eyes. This wasn't just her space, it was ours. But the more I looked, the more I saw how much of it she had claimed. Her clothes spilling out of the closet we were supposed to share. Her decorations covering the shelves. Her friends' voices lingering in the corners like ghosts. It didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a stage she used, with me cast as the background character. And that realization lit a spark I hadn't felt in a long time. I wanted my space back. My life back. Saturday night, while she was off God knows where with whoever she had been messaging, I sat at the kitchen table and thought about my dad's words again. Respect is the only thing that keeps love alive. The moment one of you starts treating the other like they don't matter, it's over. It was over. She just didn't know it yet. But here's the thing. I wasn't going to end it in the way she expected. She thought I'd yell, cry, beg for answers. She thought I'd cling to her, desperate to fix what she had already destroyed. That was the script she had written for me, the role she had rehearsed me into. But I wasn't going to play it. If she saw me as predictable, then my unpredictability was going to be the sharpest tool I had. So I started planning, not in some grand, cinematic way, but in the quiet details that would catch her off guard. I gathered the spare key she didn't know I had hidden. I started setting aside the documents and things that mattered to me, my passport, my savings information, the keepsakes she never bothered to notice. I boxed up small pieces of my life while she was gone, each item pulled from under her shadow. And then I thought about the note, the words that would shatter her certainty the way she had shattered my trust. I didn't know exactly what I would write yet, but I knew it had to be simple, honest, something she couldn't laugh off, couldn't twist into a joke, something that would make her stop in her tracks and finally realize what she had lost. By Sunday, I was exhausted, but it was a different kind of exhaustion. Not the hollow kind that came from chasing after scraps of affection, but the heavy, steady kind that comes from carrying a decision you know you're going to follow through on. She was coming home that evening, expecting me to be waiting with the same predictable silence. Instead, she was going to find the beginning of the end. And as I sat there in the quiet apartment, the clock ticking toward her return, I realized I wasn't broken anymore. I was ready. When she walked back in that Sunday evening, all smiles and feigned exhaustion, I played my role one last time. I greeted her with calm indifference, asked if she had fun, and listened to the carefully polished stories she recited about shopping and spa days. She didn't notice the difference in my tone. She didn't notice that my eyes weren't lingering on her anymore, searching for the person I once believed she was. She didn't notice that while she unpacked her bags, I was already miles away in my mind. That was the first step in my rise, detachment. For months, my emotions had been her favorite tool. She could pull a smirk, a laugh, or a sharp remark, and watch me shrink or defend myself. Now, she was pulling the same levers, but nothing was happening. I didn't argue. I didn't try to prove myself. I didn't chase her for answers. And the more I withdrew, the more she scrambled to test my reactions. It was subtle at first, small digs designed to spark a fight. When I didn't bite, her tone sharpened. But instead of breaking me down, each attempt only reminded me how much power she had relied on me giving her. In those quiet evenings, while she thought I was sulking, I was rebuilding. I dusted off the projects I had abandoned, the freelance work I used to enjoy, the gym routine I'd let slip away, the friendships I had neglected while bending my world around hers. I reached out to old friends for coffee, careful to keep the conversations light. I didn't spill everything at once. I just reconnected, and in their smiles, in their easy acceptance of me, I remembered the person I had been before Claire's shadow grew so large. Financially, too, I began pulling threads she hadn't noticed. Most of the bills were in my name. The lease was in my name. The utilities, the internet, even the furniture, mine. She had gotten used to living in a world I maintained without complaint, assuming it would always be that way. But I started making subtle changes. Redirecting mail, setting up a separate savings account, updating passwords. She didn't know it yet, but the foundation of her comfort was shifting beneath her feet. And with every step I took, my confidence grew. I could feel it in the way I walked, the way I spoke, even the way I looked at myself in the mirror. For so long, I had avoided my own reflection because it showed me someone who was small, diminished. Now, I was starting to see the outlines of someone I respected again. Someone who could stand tall without asking permission. Her friends noticed before she did. One evening, they were over again, sipping wine in the living room, tossing jokes back and forth. Usually, I would retreat into the kitchen, play the silent background role. This time, I sat down with them, calm and collected. When one of them made a joke at my expense, I just smiled. Not a tight, pained smile, but one of quiet amusement, as if their words didn't touch me anymore. Claire looked at me, waiting for the usual reaction, but when none came, her brow furrowed slightly. It was the first crack in her certainty, and I tucked it away like a secret victory. At work, too, my rise showed. Without the constant weight of trying to manage her moods, my focus returned. Projects that had once felt overwhelming became manageable. My boss noticed, praising me for stepping up, hinting at opportunities one hadn't dared to dream about months before. With every success, I felt another layer of her grip peeling away. But the biggest shift came in the quiet moments. The mornings when I woke up before her and went for a run, the evenings when I cooked meals just for myself and savored them without waiting for her approval. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living for me. And the stronger I grew, the more I could see how much she had underestimated me. She thought I would cling, beg, crumble. Instead, I was rising in silence, building a version of myself she would never be able to diminish again. And she could sense it, even if she couldn't explain it. Her eyes lingered on me longer. Her comments grew sharper, more desperate, as if trying to provoke the old reactions. But I was beyond them now. I wasn't her punchline anymore. I wasn't even in her audience. I was writing my own script, and she hadn't been cast in it. What she didn't know was that while she grew restless with my quiet strength, I was laying the groundwork for the moment that would change everything. Because the rise wasn't just about reclaiming my pride. It was about preparing for the day when her key would no longer open the door she thought she owned. By the time winter rolled around, my detachment had hardened into something sharper: focus. I wasn't drifting anymore. I wasn't just recovering. I was preparing. Every quiet move I made, every late-night hour I spent thinking, had a purpose. Claire still thought she was in control, but she was walking through a house where the walls were slowly shifting, the floorboards being pulled from under her feet, and she didn't even realize it. The first step in the setup came from something she let slip. One evening, after a few too many glasses of wine, she laughed with her friends and said, "Daniel's harmless. He couldn't leave even if he wanted to. Everything's in my name." Her words froze me for a moment, but then I realized something she didn't. Nothing was in her name. She had never bothered to check the paperwork. The lease was mine. The bills, the utilities, the Wi-Fi account, mine. Every official tie that bound this apartment together, every string that held the place running, ran through me. She had mistaken my silence for dependence, when really, she was the dependent one. That discovery was the shift in power I hadn't even been looking for. She was standing on ground she thought was hers, but I had been the one maintaining it all along. I didn't say anything in the moment, of course. I smiled quietly, refilled her friend's glasses, and went to bed early. But inside, I felt a new kind of calm. I wasn't just regaining my strength. I was in control of the very life she thought she owned. The second step was financial. For months, I had been quietly funneling extra money into a separate account, tightening my spending, cutting out anything unnecessary. At first, it was just for me, to have a cushion, an escape fund if I needed it. But the more I saved, the more I realized what kind of position it put me in. If she tried to fight me, if she tried to spin her story, I wouldn't be scrambling. I'd be steady. She had no idea, because she never looked at the bills or the bank statements. She thought my predictability meant she didn't have to pay attention, that ignorance would cost her more than she could imagine. And then, there was the practical setup, the logistics of what was to come. I started moving my essentials quietly, one by one. Important papers went into a locked drawer at work. Family keepsakes went into storage at my brother's place. Even small things, clothes, electronics, tools, I began cycling out, so that by the time I was ready, there wouldn't be much left for her to hold over me. To her, nothing had changed. To me, everything was already in motion. One of the most satisfying moments came when I changed the spare key. She didn't know about it. I had hidden it years ago under a loose brick by the back stairwell, just in case I ever locked myself out. I switched it with a new copy, updated to a lock she didn't know I had already arranged to replace. It was symbolic at first, but the act filled me with a quiet thrill. For the first time, she didn't hold the key to this relationship, literally or figuratively. But perhaps the most important setup wasn't physical. It was social. Remember how she had been painting herself as the victim, telling friends I was controlling and insecure? I began countering that, not with arguments, not with accusations, but with small, undeniable truths. I showed up more confident, more self-assured, less tethered to her every mood. I reconnected with people she thought I had drifted from, and they saw the difference in me. The old narrative she had spun started to unravel because it no longer fit the man standing in front of them. And once people begin to see cracks in a story, they stop believing the storyteller. Through all this, I kept my mask on at home. I let her think I was the same quiet, predictable Daniel. She still went on her girls' nights, still left her phone face down on the counter, still smirked when I didn't argue. She thought the game was the same, but she didn't realize the rules had already changed. I wasn't just preparing to walk away. I was preparing to leave her with nothing to stand on when I did. And in the middle of all this, the idea of the note solidified. It had to be short, clear, the kind of message that would echo in her head long after she read it. Something that would strip away the smirk, that would replace her laughter with silence. I drafted it in my head a dozen times, testing the words, rolling them over in my mind. I wanted her to feel the finality of it, to feel what it was like to be on the outside, with no key, no power, no certainty. By the time her next weekend trip approached, I wasn't nervous anymore. I was steady, focused. Every piece was in place. She thought she was stepping out into another carefree escape. What she didn't know was that when she returned, the door she had always assumed would open for her was about to stay shut. Friday morning came, and with it, the familiar routine of her departure. Claire floated around the apartment in her usual whirlwind, tossing clothes into her bag, humming as if she didn't have a care in the world. She kissed me on the cheek absent-mindedly, an act more of habit than affection, and tossed over her shoulder. "Don't wait up for me, okay?" "Of course," I said evenly, keeping my voice steady, betraying none of what I knew was about to happen. When the door closed behind her, I didn't waste time. I called the locksmith who had already been briefed earlier in the week. By noon, the locks on the apartment were changed, smooth and quiet. He handed me the new set of keys, and I turned them in my hand, feeling their weight like a shift in my entire life. The apartment, once filled with her voice and her chaos, suddenly felt different, lighter, freer. For the first time, it was mine again, not a stage for her performance. Then came the note. I had thought long and hard about what to write. Pages of drafts lay crumpled in my drawer, filled with everything I could have said: anger, hurt, accusations. But I knew that wasn't what would matter. Claire thrived on conflict, on turning every confrontation into a spectacle she could twist and retell. What she wouldn't be able to twist was silence sharpened into truth. So I wrote, "Claire, this home isn't yours anymore. The lease, the bills, the life you've taken for granted, all of it was mine. You lied, you mocked, and you thought I would never leave. You were wrong. Don't try the key. It won't work. Don't call me. There's nothing left to say. Daniel." Short. Final. No room for argument. I placed the note on the inside of the door, taped it eye level, where she would see it the moment she tried to step inside. The rest of that day was strangely calm. I boxed up the last of her things, the clothes that had invaded the closet, the makeup scattered across the bathroom counter, the trinkets and keepsakes she had left on every surface. Each box was stacked neatly by the door, like the physical embodiment of her absence. I didn't destroy anything, didn't throw it out the window in a fit of rage. That wasn't the point. This wasn't about chaos. It was about clarity. By Sunday evening, I was ready. I had stayed at a friend's place, giving myself distance, knowing she'd be returning that night. My friend lived only a few blocks away, so when the time came, I walked back quietly, standing far enough down the street to see without being seen. The lights in the apartment were off, the notes still waiting, the boxes lined up like silent witnesses. Then I saw her. Claire pulled up, stepping out of the car with her bag slung over her shoulder, chatting into her phone with that same breezy tone she always had after one of her weekends. She walked up to the door, still laughing, still sure of herself, and slipped her key into the lock. It didn't turn. I watched from the shadows as she frowned, tried again, then again, her movements sharper each time. She rattled the handle, her laughter dying into silence. Confusion spread across her face, quickly replaced by frustration. She crouched down, tried the lock again, harder this time, and then pulled out her phone as if to call me. But before she could, her eyes lifted and landed on the note. I couldn't see every detail from where I stood, but I saw her freeze, saw her eyes widen as they scanned the words. Her hand fell slowly to her side, the phone slipping slightly from her grasp. She reached up, tore the note from the door, read it again, her lips moving silently as if trying to process the finality of it. That was the moment, the exact second when her smirk, her laughter, her certainty, all of it shattered. She stood there on the doorstep, holding the note in trembling hands, the boxes of her belongings stacked around her like silent judges. For the first time, she wasn't in control. For the first time, she wasn't the one laughing. I turned and walked away then, leaving her frozen in that doorway. The street was quiet except for the echo of my own footsteps, steady and sure. Behind me, I knew she was standing in the wreckage of the power she thought she had, holding the words that told her everything she never believed I could do. But that wasn't the end, not yet. Because revenge doesn't end with the act itself. It ends with the fallout, with the way they scramble to pick up the pieces of the life they thought they had secured. And that part was still to come. I didn't go back to the apartment that night. I stayed at my friend's place, phone off, finally able to sleep without the weight of her presence pressing against me. The next morning, when I turned my phone back on, the messages were waiting, dozens of them. At first, they were frantic. Daniel, the lock is broken. Let me in. Where are you? This isn't funny. Pick up the phone right now. Then they shifted, sharp and biting. You're being ridiculous. You can't just do this to me. You're going to regret embarrassing me like this. And then, slowly, the tone softened. Apologies trickled in, wrapped in excuses. I didn't mean to hurt you. You're overreacting. We can talk about this, please. Each message grew more desperate, as though she could sense that her grip on me was slipping for good. I didn't respond. By the end of the day, she showed up at my office. My coworkers spotted her in the lobby, demanding to see me, her voice raised in that mix of anger and panic I knew too well. Security escorted her out before she could reach my floor, and word spread quickly. Whatever image she had tried to build of me being the weak, controlling partner collapsed in that moment. People saw her as she truly was, loud, entitled, unraveling. I walked into the break room that afternoon to a round of quiet nods and pats on the shoulder. No one asked questions, but I could see in their eyes that the narrative had shifted. She tried one last time later that week, calling from a blocked number. This time, her voice cracked. Daniel, you can't just throw everything away. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. Don't you see? We're meant to be together. I let the silence hang for a moment, then said the only words I had left for her. Respect was all I asked for. You laughed instead, and I hung up. That was the last time I heard her voice. In the weeks that followed, the fallout played out like clockwork. Mutual friends stopped reaching out to her after hearing both sides. The man she had been sneaking away with? He didn't stick around once he realized the drama wasn't going to be hidden anymore. She moved in with her sister temporarily, but I knew through the grapevine that it didn't last. Her pattern of control and contempt burned bridges quickly when the illusion of power was gone. Meanwhile, my life grew steadier. I signed a new lease, smaller but fully mine, and filled it only with the things that mattered to me. I started running regularly, picked up freelance work again, even rejoined an old band of friends for weekend jam sessions. Every step forward reminded me that I had been carrying her weight for years, mistaking it for companionship. Now, without it, I could breathe again. The last loose end tied itself up about a month later. I returned to the old apartment building to drop off the final check for utilities. As I was leaving, I saw her standing outside, shoulders slumped, holding a single bag at her side. She saw me too, and for a moment, her eyes lit up like she thought I might stop, might reconsider. But I didn't. I walked past, steady, without a word. She whispered something as I passed. I couldn't catch all of it, but I heard the word please. I didn't look back, because in that moment, I realized the most powerful revenge wasn't the lock, the note, or even the silence. It was walking away with my head high, leaving her standing in the ruins of the power she thought she would always have over me. And that's how it ended, her holding nothing, and me finally holding myself.